Imagine for a moment that you're standing in front of the mirror, looking into your own eyes and asking yourself, why do I feel this constant need to emotionally connect with someone who doesn't reciprocate in the same way? This question echoes in the minds of thousands of women who experience the dilemma of excessive emotional attachment. Napoleon Hill, in his studies on the human mind and personal success, always emphasized that our ability to control our thoughts determines the quality of our experiences. And when we talk about relationships, this principle becomes even more crucial. Unbalanced emotional attachment isn't just about love or affection. It's about how we program our minds to seek external validation instead of building a solid internal foundation. The truth is, we often confuse love with emotional dependency. We create a mental narrative where our happiness, our self-esteem, and even our sense of identity depend on the approval, attention, or reciprocity of another person. It's as if we've handed over the keys to our happiness to someone who never even asked for that responsibility. But here's the first powerful insight. Recognizing this pattern is already the first step toward transformation. When you can stop and observe your own thoughts without judgment, you create a sacred space between the stimulus and your response. In that space lies your freedom to choose. Emotional detachment doesn't mean becoming cold or insensitive. On the contrary, it means developing the ability to love in a mature, conscious, and balanced way. It's about learning to maintain your emotional integrity even when the other person doesn't meet your expectations or affective needs. Think of detachment as a refined art. Just as an artist learns to hold the brush firmly enough to create, yet lightly enough to let the art flow naturally, you can learn to relate with love and presence without losing yourself in the process. What Hill discovered in his research is that the human mind has a natural tendency to fixate on patterns that provide some kind of reward, even if that reward is dysfunctional. In the case of excessive attachment, the reward might be the illusion of control, the familiarity of a known dynamic, or even the validation of limiting beliefs about ourselves. When you start to question these hidden rewards, you open up the possibility of choosing healthier rewards that are aligned with your true well-being. Instead of seeking constant approval, you can seek self-approval. Instead of fearing abandonment, you can cultivate the certainty that you are complete on your own. The first practical step to begin this process is to develop what we call the internal observer, that part of you that can watch your own emotional and mental patterns with compassionate curiosity, without completely identifying with them. When you feel that familiar urge to check your phone for the 10th time, to analyze every word of the last conversation, or to change your plans to fit his availability, stop, breathe, and ask, what is really happening inside of me right now? The mind is like a garden that you cultivate daily, and Napoleon Hill knew this deeply. Every thought you allow to sprout and grow in your consciousness eventually manifests in your emotions, behaviors, and consequently in your relational experiences. When we become excessively attached to someone, we are actually cultivating seeds of thought that keep us in a cycle of emotional dependency. Let's dive deeper into this process. Imagine your mind has neural pathways, like trails in a forest. The more you walk down a specific trail, the more defined and easy to travel it becomes. If you have a habit of interpreting his silence as rejection, of constantly looking for clues about his feelings, or of feeling that your happiness depends on the attention he gives you, you are strengthening these limiting neural pathways. But here's the liberating news. You have the power to create new trails. The brain's neuroplasticity shows us that we can literally rewire our thought patterns at any age. The secret lies in consistency and conscious intention. Start by observing the specific moments when the attachment intensifies. Maybe it's when he takes a while to reply to a message, when he cancels a date, or when you notice he's less emotionally available. In those moments, instead of following the automatic pattern of anxiety and over-analysis, you can choose a different response. A powerful technique, based on Hill's principles of autosuggestion, is to create affirmations that redirect your mental energy. But we're not talking about superficial, empty affirmations. We're talking about statements that deeply touch your inner truth. For example, instead of "he will love me," you can affirm "I am worthy of unconditional love, and I choose to relate from my completeness, not from my lack." The difference is subtle but transformative. The first affirmation still places your well-being in someone else's hands. The second reclaims your personal power and acknowledges your intrinsic nature of completeness. Another crucial aspect is understanding that excessive attachment often stems from unhealed emotional wounds from the past. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where you had to perform to be accepted, or where emotional abandonment was a constant reality. These experiences create deep mental programming that influences how you relate in your adult life. The healing process doesn't mean erasing the past, but rather integrating those experiences in a way that they don't automatically determine your present. You can honor the inner child who developed emotional survival strategies while consciously choosing to operate from the wisdom of who you are today. A transformative practice is what we call conscious internal dialogue. When you catch yourself in a pattern of anxious attachment, imagine you're talking to your best friend who is going through the same situation. What would you say to her? How would you advise her? We can often offer others the compassion and balanced perspective that we deny ourselves. Hill always emphasized the importance of the mental environment we create. If you are constantly feeding your mind with thoughts of romantic scarcity, with obsessive analyses of his every gesture or word, you are creating a toxic mental environment that will naturally produce more attachment and dependency. In contrast, when you consciously nurture thoughts of abundance, self-worth, and personal growth, you create a different magnetic field around you. You become someone who loves from a place of fullness, not lack, and this completely transforms the dynamic of any relationship. There is a crucial moment in any woman's journey where she must make a fundamental choice: continue to seek love outside of herself, or begin to cultivate an intimate and loving relationship with herself. Napoleon Hill discovered that all great human transformations begin with a radical change in how we see and treat ourselves. Genuine self-love is not narcissism or selfishness. It is the foundation upon which healthy relationships are built. When you truly love yourself, you don't need external validation to confirm your worth. You don't bend over backwards to fit into others' expectations, nor do you accept emotional crumbs thinking it's the most you deserve. But let's be honest, developing true self-love is one of the most challenging tasks a person can undertake, especially if you grew up in a society that teaches women to prioritize the needs of others before their own. It's like learning a new language after years of speaking only dialects of self-sabotage and self-criticism. The first aspect of self-love is to develop what we call internal mothering. This means learning to be for yourself the loving, present, and understanding mother that perhaps you didn't have or that you still seek in the outside world. When you are going through difficult times, instead of harshly criticizing yourself or desperately seeking comfort from others, you learn to embrace yourself with the same tenderness you would offer a frightened child. Hill always spoke about the importance of taking full responsibility for your own life, and this includes taking responsibility for nurturing and caring for your emotional well-being. It is not any man's responsibility to make you feel complete, valued, or loved. That is your most sacred responsibility to yourself. A powerful practice is to start each day by asking yourself, how can I show love for myself today? It could be through nutritious food choices, exercises that make your body feel alive, time in silence to connect with your essence, or simply speaking to yourself with kindness instead of harshness. Self-love also involves setting healthy boundaries. When you truly love yourself, you naturally protect your emotional energy. You don't accept disrespectful behavior. You don't make yourself emotionally available to someone who doesn't value your presence, and you don't sacrifice your fundamental needs to maintain a relationship that doesn't nourish you. Often, the fear of setting boundaries comes from the unconscious belief that if we are too demanding, we will lose the person. But here's a liberating truth. Anyone you lose for having healthy standards wasn't really yours to begin with. True love flourishes in the presence of clear boundaries, not in their absence. Another essential aspect of self-love is learning to celebrate your own company. How often do you feel uncomfortable being alone? How many times do you fill every moment of solitude with distractions so you don't have to face your own thoughts and feelings? The relationship you have with yourself is the longest and most important one of your life. It's worth investing in. Start creating self-care rituals that don't depend on anyone's presence or approval. It could be a long bath with candles, a contemplative walk in nature, writing in a journal, or simply sitting in silence and breathing consciously. These moments are not luxuries or indulgences. They are investments in the quality of the most important relationship of your life. Hill taught that our dominant thoughts determine our reality. If your dominant thoughts about yourself are of criticism, inadequacy, or lack, you will inevitably attract experiences that confirm these beliefs. But when you consciously cultivate thoughts of self-love, worthiness, and completeness, you begin to attract people and situations that reflect this new vibrational frequency. One of Napoleon Hill's most revolutionary discoveries was understanding that all energy can be transmuted. The same energy you spend obsessively worrying about him, analyzing every word, every gesture, every silence, can be channeled into creating an extraordinary version of yourself. It's like discovering you had a superpower all along, but you were using it in a limiting way. Think for a moment about the amount of mental and emotional energy you invest when you are attached to someone. You wake up thinking about him, spend the day interpreting signs, and go to sleep replaying conversations. This is a staggering amount of life force that is being directed away from you, as if you have an emotional faucet constantly running, draining your life energy. Now imagine if all that energy were redirected to nurture your dreams, develop your talents, strengthen your physical and mental health, deepen your friendships, or explore aspects of yourself that have lain dormant. The transformation would be not just noticeable, but magnetic. The first step in this energy transmutation is to recognize that excessive attachment is fundamentally misdirected creative energy. You have a natural capacity to love deeply, to dedicate yourself intensely, to dream vividly. These are precious qualities. The problem is not having these qualities, but directing them exclusively toward one person who may or may not be available to fully receive them. A powerful practical technique is what we call conscious redirection. Every time you catch yourself lost in thoughts about him, stop for a moment and ask, if I were to invest this same energy into something that would bring me closer to my dreams, what would it be? It could be working on that creative project you abandoned, studying something that has always sparked your curiosity, or simply making a call to a dear friend you haven't seen in a while. Hill always emphasized that great achievements are born from the ability to maintain concentrated focus on definite goals. When you are emotionally scattered, investing mental energy in things you have no control over, like the feelings and behaviors of another person, you are preventing your creative force from fully manifesting. There is also a deep spiritual dimension to this process of transmutation. When you learn to direct your loving energy first toward yourself and then toward your life projects, you align with the natural flow of creation. You stop being someone who consumes energy through anxious attachment and become someone who generates energy through conscious creation. One of the most transformative practices is to create what we call a parallel passion project. Choose something that genuinely inspires you. It could be learning a new skill, starting an artistic project, dedicating yourself to a social cause, or developing a specific aspect of your career. The key is that it must be something that connects you with your creative essence and doesn't depend on external validation to exist. Every time you feel the energy of attachment intensifying, consciously redirect that energy to your passion project. Use the emotional intensity as fuel for creation, not for obsession. It's amazing how this simple shift in direction can completely transform your relationship with yourself and, consequently, with others. Another crucial aspect is to understand that personal growth is not a destination, but a way of living. When you are genuinely committed to your own development, emotional, mental, spiritual, creative, you naturally become less available for toxic relational dynamics. Not because you are defensively protecting yourself, but because you are too busy creating an extraordinary life to accept anything less than what you deserve. Hill discovered that people who are constantly growing and expanding naturally attract other people who are on the same level of evolution. It's as if you change your vibrational frequency and automatically tune into a different station in life, where healthy, reciprocal, and nurturing relationships are the norm, not the exception. Napoleon Hill always said that knowledge without application is wasted potential. Now that you understand the theoretical basis of healthy emotional detachment, it's time to translate that understanding into practical strategies you can implement immediately in your daily life. The first fundamental strategy is what we call conscious pauses. Whenever you feel the familiar urge to check if he has replied, to analyze the tone of the last conversation, or to change your plans to accommodate his availability, institute a pause of at least 10 minutes. During this pause, breathe deeply and connect with your physical body. Feel your feet on the ground, your hands, your breath. This anchoring in the physical present interrupts the obsessive mental cycle and creates space for more conscious choices. The second strategy is to develop what we call an independent emotional agenda. This means creating a life so rich and interesting that the presence or absence of any specific person does not determine the quality of your days. Start filling your schedule with activities that nourish and inspire you: dance classes, book clubs, nature walks, creative projects, volunteering, or anything that makes your heart vibrate independently. A particularly powerful technique is the expanded perspective exercise. When you feel consumed by worries about the relationship, visualize yourself 5 years from now. Imagine the extraordinary woman you can become if you invest all this emotional energy in your own growth. Visualize your life, your relationships, your projects, your confidence. Now ask, 5 years from now, what will be more important? Having spent energy worrying about someone who might not even be in my life anymore, or having used that energy to become who I truly am? Another essential strategy is to learn to communicate your needs clearly and lovingly, without specific expectations of the outcome. Instead of hints, mind games, or attempts to control the other's responses, practice direct and authentic communication. Say what you feel, what you need, what you are available to offer, and then let go of the result. This practice develops your emotional integrity and eliminates the need to constantly guess what the other person is thinking. Hill always emphasized the importance of having a council of internal mentors. Create an imaginary group of women you admire. They can be historical figures, contemporary ones, or even future versions of yourself. Whenever you are facing a challenging situation in the relationship, consult this internal council. Ask, what would this woman do in this situation? How would she position herself? What choice would she make? This connects you with wiser and more empowered aspects of your own psyche. A transformative daily practice is the homecoming ritual. Every night before you go to sleep, perform a small symbolic ceremony where you consciously gather all the emotional energy you've scattered throughout the day. Visualize yourself collecting all the thoughts and worries you've directed toward other people and bringing that energy back to your own center. Breathe that energy back into yourself and use it to nurture your own dreams and projects. It's also crucial to develop what we call tolerance for uncertainty. Excessive attachment often arises from discomfort with not knowing, with the inability to control the feelings and behaviors of another. Practice being comfortable with questions that don't have immediate answers. Is he thinking of me? Will our relationship evolve? What will happen in the future? Instead of trying to resolve these uncertainties through obsessive analysis, practice holding the space of not knowing with grace and trust. A powerful practical tool is to create what we call personal well-being indicators. List 5 specific things you can do regularly that connect you with your essence and make you feel good about yourself, regardless of any external situation. It could be meditating for 10 minutes, writing 3 pages in a journal, exercising, preparing a nutritious meal, or talking with a dear friend. When you notice you're getting lost in attachment patterns, immediately return to these indicators. We have arrived at the most sacred point of this transformative journey, the moment where you integrate emotional detachment not as a temporary strategy to get the guy, but as a life philosophy that connects you with your true essence and personal power. Napoleon Hill discovered that the greatest human transformations happen when we change not just our behaviors, but our fundamental identity. Mature detachment is, in fact, the opposite of what many people imagine. It's not coldness, indifference, or emotional shielding. It's the ability to love fully while remaining whole. It's being able to give yourself completely to an experience or relationship, knowing that you will not lose yourself in the process, because you have a solid connection with yourself that no one can shake. Imagine a tree with deep roots. It can dance freely with the wind, bend gracefully during storms, offer its fruits generously, but it never loses its stability because it is firmly anchored in its own essence. This is the perfect metaphor for a woman who has mastered the art of loving detachment. When you truly integrate this quality, something magical happens in your relationships. You stop attracting people who need to be fixed, who are emotionally unavailable, or who see relationships as power games. Instead, you naturally magnetize people who, like you, operate from completeness, not from lack. One of the most liberating aspects of this integration is realizing that you can love someone deeply and at the same time be completely prepared to move on with your life without them if they choose a different path. This is not a contradiction. It's emotional maturity. It's the difference between loving with open hands and loving with clenched fists. Hill always taught that our greatest wealth is not in what we possess, but in who we become. When you become an emotionally free woman, you acquire something that no one can take from you: the ability to create extraordinary relationships because you don't need them to feel complete. This emotional freedom also manifests in how you navigate the natural challenges of any relationship. Instead of interpreting conflicts as threats to your emotional security, you see them as opportunities for mutual growth. Instead of fearing the end of a relationship as a personal catastrophe, you recognize it as a possible natural redirection in life. One of the most powerful practices to maintain this integration is what we call authenticity check-ins. Regularly ask yourself, am I being true to myself in this relationship? Am I honoring my needs and values? Am I behaving in a way that I am proud of, regardless of the other person's response? These questions keep you anchored in your personal integrity. Another crucial aspect is to celebrate your own evolution. Acknowledge and honor every moment you choose to respond from your wisdom instead of reacting from fear or neediness. Every time you stick to your plans, even when he cancels his, every time you express a need without apologizing, every time you choose to nurture a friendship instead of waiting for his message, these are significant victories that deserve recognition. Integrated detachment also includes the ability to see other people, especially the men in your life, as complex human beings with their own fears, limitations, and growth journeys. You stop idealizing them as potential saviors or demonizing them as villains. You see them with compassion and clarity, which paradoxically creates more genuine intimacy. Finally, remember that this journey doesn't have a definitive endpoint. You don't wake up one day completely cured of excessive attachment forever. It is an ongoing process of conscious choices, of constant returns to your center, of gentle reminders to yourself about who you really are. The true mark of an emotionally free woman is not that she never feels attachment or longing. It's that she feels these natural human emotions without being controlled by them. It's being able to love generously, dream hopefully, and surrender completely while always knowing that your happiness and completeness do not depend on any specific external response. When you integrate this quality, you don't just transform your romantic relationships, you transform your entire life experience. You become a force of nature, a woman who loves from abundance, who relates from choice, not from need, and who radiates the deep peace that comes from knowing that you are already everything you have ever been looking for. This is your true freedom, the ability to love without fear, to dream without expectations, to live without needing life to be different than it is for you to be happy. This is the essence of conscious detachment, Not less love, but wiser, more mature, and truer love.